6 hours from the nearest paved road, a young girl kneels between two cacao trees, machete in hand, sorting pods twice her own body weight into a woven sack. She is 9 years old. She has never eaten chocolate. 4,000 miles away, in the 7th arrondissement of Paris, a shopper lifts a chocolate bar from a marble display shelf. The wrapper is matte black, embossed in gold foil. Auvane, ethically sourced. Single origin, cacao you can trace to the family that grew it. She does not know the family's name. Neither, by then, did the woman whose signature was on that seal. This is not a story about a company that lied. This is a story about a woman who believed with total sincerity in a promise she had stopped being able to keep and never noticed the moment it happened. This is case file number 006, Auvane Cacao Co, and the woman who never had to lie. But to understand how a woman who genuinely believed in that seal ended up here, we need to go back to the beginning. Elodie Fontaine did not grow up around money. She grew up around flavor. She was born in Lyon in 1979, the daughter of a bakery owner who let her spend her Saturdays sorting through burlap sacks of imported goods in the back room, memorizing the smell of vanilla from Madagascar, coffee from Ethiopia, cacao from wherever the wholesaler happened to have that week. By 14, she could tell you which region a cacao bean came from just by breaking it in half. By 22, she had left culinary school and talked her way into an apprenticeship with one of Paris's most respected and most difficult master chocolatiers. He taught her one lesson above all others. Chocolate is not made in the factory. It is made on the tree, in the soil, in the hands of the farmer who ferments and dries the bean before it ever reaches a kitchen. Everything after that is refinement. The origin is the truth. Everything else is decoration. His name was Julian Aubry, and he ran his kitchen the way some men run monasteries. Silent, exacting, contemptuous of shortcuts. When a young Fontaine once asked whether a cheaper, closer supplier might work just as well for a batch of holiday truffles, he made her taste both bars blind, side by side, until she could name which one had been grown on soil that had never seen a pesticide. She never asked the question again. She would later say it was the single most important lesson of her career. Fontaine believed him completely. In 2008, at 29, she opened a single storefront in the 11th arrondissement. 12 square meters, a hand-painted sign, and a promise she made to herself before she ever made it to a customer. She would only work with farms she had visited herself, cooperatives she had shaken hands with, families whose names she knew. For 3 years, she kept that promise. She flew to a small coastal cooperative in West Africa twice a year, slept in the guest house of the family who supplied her signature bar, and paid nearly double the commodity price because she had seen, with her own eyes, exactly what that price actually cost the people who grew it. The shop became a sensation. Food critics wrote about the woman who could tell you the name of the farmer behind every bar. A single glowing profile in a national newspaper sent order volume up 6-fold in a single month. She had built something rare, a business where the ethics were not a marketing layer added on top of the product, but the product itself, indistinguishable from the taste people were suddenly obsessed with. Even then, she kept a single framed photograph behind the counter. Herself, 4 years younger, standing in a cacao grove beside the farmer whose beans made her very first bar. Customers assumed it was sentiment. She would later admit it had also been proof, kept close enough to touch, that the promise was real. She had no idea, standing behind that 12 square meter counter, that the promise she was making herself would not be the thing that eventually broke. Growth would be the thing that broke it. A department store buyer walked in unannounced in late 2011 and offered her national distribution, 300 locations by spring, It was the kind of offer chocolatiers wait a lifetime for and almost never receive. Fontaine said yes before she had done the math on how many cacao farms 300 stores would actually require. It felt, in the moment, like validation. It would later look, to anyone reconstructing the case, like the first day the math began to outrun the map. By 2013, Auvane operated in 340 retail locations across France, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. The tiny cooperative that had supplied her original signature bar could not begin to produce enough cacao to meet that demand, not within 100 times its size. A private equity fund that had bought a minority stake the year before sent one of its partners to Fontaine's Paris office with a single question, asked by every account without any hostility at all. Could the company double its volume within 12 months without doubling its price? Fontaine said yes. She would later say she believed it was possible without changing anything essential about what Auvane was. She was not lying. She was simply wrong about what would turn out to be essential. Fontaine did what nearly every founder in her position does. She stopped sourcing directly from farms and started sourcing through intermediaries, regional trading houses who aggregated cacao from dozens, sometimes hundreds, of smaller producers across a wider growing region on the West African coast. It was faster. It was necessary. And it meant that for the first time, Fontaine could no longer say she had personally met the people whose hands had touched her cacao. She solved that problem the way a growing company solves most problems, with paperwork. Auvane commissioned a third-party certification body to audit its network of suppliers and issue the label that would eventually appear on every wrapper in every store. Ethically sourced, single origin. The certification company was smaller than it looked on its own letterhead. It was paid by Auvane to conduct the audits, a standard, unremarkable arrangement across the entire industry, and also, structurally, an arrangement where the auditor's continued income depended on finding as few problems as possible. Fontaine did not choose that structure to deceive anyone. She chose it because it was the version everyone in her industry used, and because the seal it produced let her keep telling the story she had built her entire company on, without having to personally verify, farm by farm, that the story was still true. The framed photograph behind the counter came down when the 11th arrondissement storefront closed in 2014, replaced by a corporate headquarters 3 times its size. Nobody remembers exactly who packed it away or where it ended up. In 2015, an operations manager, hired specifically to manage the growing web of trading house relationships, flagged an irregularity in one supplier's paperwork. Labor records for a cluster of farms in the network did not match the harvest volumes those same farms were reporting. The discrepancy suggested workers who existed on no payroll, doing hours no invoice accounted for. The report went up one level to a supply chain director. It was marked as a documentation error, not a priority, and folded into a routine follow-up scheduled for the next annual review, 11 months away. It never reached Fontaine's desk, not because anyone hid it from her, because the company she had built now had 4 layers of management between the woman whose name was on the seal and the people whose lives the seal was supposed to protect. By 2015, that was simply how information moved, or failed to. Sales that year crossed 40 million euros. Fontaine appeared on the cover of a business magazine under the headline, "The Woman Who Proved Ethics Sells." She read it on a plane back from a farm visit, one of only 4 she personally made that entire year, down from 12 annual visits half a decade earlier, and felt, she would later say, entirely at peace with what she had built. In early 2017, a documentary crew working with an international labor rights organization arrived, uninvited and unannounced, at a cluster of cacao farms roughly 90 kilometers inland from the coast. Farms that had never appeared on any Auvane marketing material, in any audit summary, on any map the company had ever shown a journalist. They were, on paper, 3 layers removed from Auvane, subcontracted to a subcontractor of a trading house that supplied a portion of Auvane's cacao. What the crew filmed over 6 weeks did not require narration. Children as young as 8, carrying loads that exceeded international labor guidelines by a factor of 3. No school within walking distance for any of them. A forest reserve, protected by law, cleared of nearly 400 hectares of old-growth canopy to expand cacao planting. Cacao that, traced through 3 sets of shipping manifests, ended up in the same processing facility that produced roughly 1/5 of Auvane's total annual supply. The documentary was released in the autumn of 2017 under a title that needed no embellishment, The Ethical Label. Within 72 hours, it had been viewed 9 million times. The operations manager who had filed the original 2015 report, the one folded into a routine review 11 months out, gave a single anonymous interview to a business journalist that winter. Asked why the warning never reached Fontaine directly, the answer was almost administrative in its plainness. That was not how the reporting structure worked by then. Warnings went up. They did not automatically go all the way up. Nobody had ever decided that the founder shouldn't see them. Nobody had ever decided she should either. Auvane's public response followed a script that has, by now, become almost a genre of its own. A statement, issued within a day, expressing deep concern and zero tolerance. A promise to immediately sever ties with the offending supplier. A supplier so far down the chain that Auvane's own records did not contain its name until the documentary named it first. An emergency third-party audit, completed in 11 days, that found the original certification process had been, in the company's own words, insufficiently rigorous given the complexity of the supply network. Fontaine gave one interview in the weeks that followed to a French business daily. She did not deny the footage. She did not claim it had been fabricated. She said instead something that would end up quoted in nearly every article written about the case afterward. I built this company so that people would never have to ask this question about a bar of chocolate. I am the person who should have kept asking it, long after everyone told me I no longer needed to. Sales fell 31% in the following 2 quarters. 14 retail partners suspended orders, pending an independent review. A rival chocolatier, smaller and slower to scale, saw sales rise 19% in the same period, from customers who said, in surveys, that they now trusted a company precisely because it had never grown fast enough to need an intermediary at all. Auvane survived. It rebuilt its supply chain, farm by farm, over the following 3 years. This time with in-house auditors, rather than a paid third party. Fontaine visited, by her own account, every single one of the 81 farms now in the network personally, at least once. Employees who traveled with her on those visits describe her taking photographs at almost every stop. The same instinct, they say, as the frame that used to hang behind her very first counter. No criminal charges were ever filed. Under the laws of every jurisdiction involved, Auvane had committed no crime. The farms belonged to independent operators. The trading houses were licensed. The certification, however flawed, had been technically compliant with every regulation that existed for it at the time. The only thing that had failed, in any legally meaningful sense, was a seal. A promise printed in gold foil on the outside of a wrapper, describing a supply chain that no one at the company that made the promise had actually walked, end to end, in over half a decade. Here is what this tribunal has heard. Elodie Fontaine did not build Auvane to exploit anyone. Every account of her, from employees, from farmers, from journalists who covered her both before and after the scandal, describes the same person. Someone who genuinely, deeply believed that chocolate could be made honestly, and who built her entire identity around proving it. That is also, precisely, the case against her. Not guilty, in this tribunal's judgment, of deliberate exploitation. Fontaine never ordered anyone to look away from a labor violation. She never personally profited from a child's 12-hour shift with any knowledge that the shift was happening. Whatever else this case is about, it is not about a founder who chose cruelty, but guilty. And this is the harder charge, the one with no single villain and no smoking memo. Guilty of building a company whose growth depended on a story she stopped verifying at exactly the moment verification became inconvenient. Guilty of letting a paid auditor's seal stand in for the personal visits she once made 12 times a year and eventually made 4. Guilty of the particular, modern kind of distance that lets a founder remain sincere while the thing she founded stops being true. Ask yourself what the photograph behind that first counter was actually for. Fontaine would say it was proof. It was also, whether she meant it that way or not, a substitute. A single image standing in for a relationship she no longer had the time to keep having, farm by farm, once there were 340 stores instead of 1. Some of you are already forming her defense. Good. It is not a weak one. Every company that scales beyond a single founder's direct oversight makes this exact trade. Every single day, all over the world. You cannot personally audit every hand that touches your product once your product touches 400,000 hands a year. The question this case actually asks is not whether Fontaine should have visited every farm herself. It is whether I couldn't have known is the same thing as I chose not to find out. And whether a seal that says ethically sourced should require more than a paid third-party signature to print. There is a version of this defense that argues the entire label was structurally dishonest from the start. Not because Fontaine lied, but because ethically sourced was never a claim any growing company could keep making truthfully once it stopped being small. If that is true, the failure was not a scandal. It was arithmetic, built into the business model the day she said yes to 300 stores. You may be right. Make that argument in the comments. I will read every one of them. What we know is this: the label promised something. The company that printed it, for a period of years, no longer had the structure in place to know whether the promise was still true. And the people who paid the actual cost of that gap were not in Paris, were not on any magazine cover, and were never asked. Auvane Cacao Co is fictional. The pattern is not. Case closed.